Well, hi, Cascade Church. It's Pastor Tim with this week's Wednesday's Word. This week we've done a lot of Bible reading. We're getting through Genesis, seeing Joseph finally. Things are progressing. In Matthew, we're reading some very interesting sayings of Jesus and continuing with the Psalms and Proverbs. So let me talk about a few things that really stood out to me. In Matthew 10, Jesus talks about peace in a way that we don't usually think about him doing it. When he was born, they proclaimed him Prince of Peace. But when he was teaching, he said in Matthew 10, verse 34, "Don't suppose that I've come here to bring peace. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I've come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. Anyone who does not love his father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their sons or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me." And that's an interesting saying because it sounds like Jesus is anti-family. But the truth is, he's changing allegiances. In those days, and some places right now, family commitments are the closest ties that we have. You're defined by your family. They know who you are because of where you came from. And then your allegiances would always be to the family. If you watch TV shows from the olden times, you see how they have these family grudges and such, and that's a little bit about what that culture was like. Jesus was saying that you have a new family now. That if your father or your sister or your son or your daughter doesn't follow Jesus, then they may hate you. And there's going to be a chance where you hold on to who Jesus is and what Jesus taught about a certain issue or about himself, and that's the most important thing. And your family disagrees, and the question is, who are you going to please? Are you going to please your kid? Are you going to please your boss, your coworker, your spouse, your dad? Or are you going to please Christ? And there's relationships I have that aren't as strong as I would like them to be earthly wise. And I know they would be stronger if I just rejected biblical teaching. And I can't do it. You're able to love, but you're also needing to hold on. And that's a very tough command. We can't get into all of the details of how that plays out ethically, all the ethical questions that can come between us. We look at this political season, how I know many Republicans who have unfriended and stopped talking to their Democratic friends, a lot of Democrats who have stopped all their Republican relationships. And they're saying Jesus is saying that's not the way relationships go. We're doing a class Monday night where there's a range of different political opinions. What we're trying to say is our first allegiance is to Christ and then to each other. And then we share values. But then how do we work those out? And that's what Jesus is saying. Is a lot of our current relationships are going to come into conflict because you now have deep wounding or deeper commitments. And that comes with wounding. And that's why I think it's so important in the next verse or next chapter in Matthew 11, he says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you'll find rest for your souls." It's one of the most powerful, most comforting verses in the Bible. The yoke that Jesus talked about was you would take a team of oxen or cows and you would put them together to pull a plow or a carriage, and it'd be a heavy load. And if you just try to pull it on your own, you would be failing. And Jesus says that we all have a yoke. We're trying to pull our lives, whether we're being based our lives on our political success or our financial success or family success, and that burden that we put on ourselves will break us. And Jesus says, "Put my burden on you." And his burden is the burden of love, the burden of faith. And following Jesus isn't always easy, but it is light. There's times, like we just talked about, where you're going to have a different relationship or a different priority. But mostly your priority is the one who loves you. And that's a light and easy burden. In Matthew 12, there's a really, really odd passage. Jesus is casting out demons, and they say that Jesus casts out demons by the power of Satan. And from there, Jesus goes into a whole diatribe about how you can't bind a strong man and then pillage the house, and a house turned against itself can't stand. And if you've ever heard your more charismatic friends praying about binding the devil, this is where they get it from. And so this is a little bit about spiritual warfare in here. It talks about how when you drive a spirit out, it goes through arid places, and if it doesn't, that place it came from was not filled, they'll find 7 worse spirits in there. I do believe that there are spiritual battles that we fight. I do believe in praying that God would drive these out. And so this might be worth some study, to sit down and talk about this passage with somebody or to really think through it. Because Paul says that we wrestle not with flesh and blood, but with principalities and powers. So we don't fight alone. We fight with the Holy Spirit on our side. The talks about the cosmic, when we sing the Lord of Angel Armies or the Lord of Hosts, it means that God commands angels and armies of them to stand against Satan. And it's not an even battle. I've been reading Alexander Hamilton's biography, and they talk about how the British outnumbered us and how we had to suddenly, smartly fight and use a lot of tactics to win the Revolutionary War. And sometimes, just from my perspective as a Christian, it feels that that's how we're fighting. It's a losing battle. Satan has the media, Satan has Hollywood, Satan has the hearts of so many people I care about, and it feels like we're in a losing war. But what Jesus says is that any strong man that looks strong, he can walk in and bind. That he's actually the winner. He's actually stronger. And so all the spiritual warfare details and how many spirits go into which person and what's the arid places mean and all that, the big gist of it is, it starts the whole passage with Jesus can just drive out demons. That's the point. Not to understand what the arid places are, not to understand how you bind a strong man. The point is Jesus drives out demons, and we're on his team. And so don't worry about him. Don't be afraid. C.S. Lewis says there's two big fears or two big tricks that Satan uses to get us. The first one is to convince us not to be afraid of him and to completely dismiss him. And the other one is to make us so afraid that we see Satan and worry everywhere. I have friends that every time their car doesn't start, it's because of a demon. The truth is somewhere in the middle. Satan is not to be afraid of, but he's someone that's real. So that's all the New Testament stuff. In the Old Testament, we sang and read Psalm 18, where we talk about pleasures at God's right hand. In the email I'm sending you with this, there's an article by John Piper that goes through that psalm and talks about how Christianity is not this ethereal place where we just push away pleasure and hold on to faith, but it's about pleasures at God's right hand and changing what we understand pleasure to be. The last thing I want to talk about, though, is the Old Testament. If you listen to the Daily Audio Bible, the commentary section, after the guy reads it, he'll talk a little bit about it. And when he gets into Joseph, he keeps talking about how this is the first human trafficking that we see in the Bible. And my wife Erica brought up a really good point that before this, you see all these women being treated poorly. Hagar just given over to Abraham. You don't see her consenting. You see Jacob's wives just saying, okay, I can't have a kid. You go sleep with my husband. And so I would disagree with him that that's necessarily the first time we see somebody trafficked. We do see the first time somebody sold into slavery, but we don't know anything about the backstory of these other women. And I just wanted to let you know that the Bible is not endorsing that behavior at all. It's simply explaining it. In those days, women were treated poorly. And if God waited for a perfect community who treated people perfectly before he would come, we'd still be waiting. After thousands of years, we still don't treat each other the way we should. And so you have to realize that the Bible sometimes describes without endorsing. So he's not saying that this is how you treat people. He's saying this is how people were treated, and that we should go from there, that we should treat each other the way Jesus is teaching us, with love and respect and commitment. So if you have any other questions, feel free to let me know. Someone emailed a question to me about timelines in Genesis. I'll be replying to them, but I want to get this video out so I have a chance to think through all that. A lot of times, though, as a short version, in the book of Genesis, you see a sneak peek where they break the time continuum, and you see Jacob or Isaac is getting married, even though that's already happened in the past because Sarah's already dead. So sometimes the timeline gets a little bit confusing. So feel free to pick up a commentary or just shoot me an email or text. I'd be happy to help you understand it. Well, God bless, and let's stay in the Word together.